So back in February 2024, there was this massive tech company that made an announcement. And they basically said their new AI had just replaced 700 human workers.
Right, and the media just went absolutely wild with it.
Totally wild.
Yeah.
The stock market basically panicked. But the craziest part about all of this, almost everyone completely misunderstood what actually happened.
Yeah, the narrative that took hold in the press was, essentially a corporate ghost story. I mean, it fed right into our collective anxiety about automation and AI taking over.
Exactly.
But when we actually sit down and analyze the internal architecture, the financial filings, the real timeline of events, the reality of what this company did is far more complicated and, honestly, significantly more cautionary.
And I think for anyone listening, if you are trying to figure out what artificial intelligence actually means for the future of work, for your own career, or like the business you run, this is the ultimate case study.
Absolutely, the ultimate one.
So today we are doing a deep dive into Klarna. Now, if you've ever bought anything online, you have probably seen their buy now, pay later button.
Oh yeah, they're everywhere.
Right. But our mission today isn't really about shopping. It's about looking past those sensational 2024 headlines to uncover the actual technical reality of their AI deployment.
Right, real story.
Yeah, the massive financial ripple effects, and the deeply surprising reason their CEO eventually had to go on record and admit they pushed the technology way, way too far.
Yeah, and to map all this out, we're pulling from a highly specific stack of sources today.
Good. Lay it out for us.
So we are evaluating Klarna's technical architecture breakdowns, their internal financial reports, the official prospectus from their massive 2025 IPO. We've got records from their intense disputes with European labor unions and direct on-the-record interviews with their executive team.
Perfect. So let's start with the sheer scale of this operation, because I think a lot of people just view Klarna as this little widget on a checkout page.
Right, they don't see the back end.
Exactly. So how big of a target was this company when they decided to just overhaul everything with AI?
Immense. I mean, truly immense. By the time of this AI rollout, they were processing payments for roughly 850,000 retailers globally.
Wow. 850,000.
Yeah, and we were talking about major brands here. Everyone from Nike to Versace. They boasted around 114 million active users.
So definitely not a small beta test.
No, not at all. Any change to their customer service infrastructure was a global high-stakes deployment.
Okay, but to understand why they deployed it so aggressively, I feel like we need to rewind a bit. Because looking at the financial sources leading up to this, they weren't exactly operating from a position of strength, right?
Right, they were under intense, almost existential financial pressure at the time. The 2022 fiscal year was basically the bloodbath for them.
A bloodbath. Okay, what happened?
Well, during the peak of the pandemic e-commerce boom in 2021, when money was cheap and everyone was just shopping from their couches.
Oh, yeah, the golden era of online shopping.
Exactly. Klarna secured funding at a staggering valuation of $45.6 billion.
$45 billion. That is huge.
They were the undisputed golden child of European fintech. But then the macroeconomic environment just violently shifted.
Right. Central banks started raising interest rates.
Yep. Interest rates went up, e-commerce growth stalled out, and investors basically stopped funding hypergrowth at all costs.
And their valuation didn't just dip. I mean, looking at the numbers, it completely cratered.
Down to $6.7 billion in 2022.
Oh my gosh. Wait, so from over 45 billion down to under 7 billion.
Yeah. That is an 85% destruction of perceived value in just a matter of months.
That is brutal.
It is. And when you experience a shock like that, you have to drastically restructure your operating costs just to survive. Consequently, Klarna laid off roughly 10% of their global staff, which amounted to about 700 internal employees.
Okay, wait, I need to pause you right there. Because I distinctly remember those headlines from 2024 screaming that an AI just fired 700 people. Are you saying the media basically conflated two totally different events?
Yes, that conflation is the single biggest misconception of this entire saga.
That's wild.
I know. The 700 internal employees laid off during the 2022 financial crash had absolutely nothing to do with the AI assistant. That assistant didn't even launch until early 2024.
Oh, wow.
In fact, Klarna never even possessed 700 in-house customer support agents for an AI to replace in the first place.
I have to admit that confuses me a little.
Yeah.
How does a company with 114 million users and a $45 billion peak valuation not have its own massive internal customer service department?
Well, it comes down to the mechanics of modern corporate outsourcing. Tech companies at that scale, they rarely build massive internal call centers. It's just too expensive and it's inflexible.
Can they use contractors?
Right, they rely on business process outsourcing, or BPOs. Klarna partnered with these giant third-party call center operators who provided a floating global pool of anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 external contractors.
Ah, okay. So it wasn't their direct staff.
Exactly. When Klarna deployed the OpenAI-powered assistant in 2024, they didn't fire internal staff. The AI simply absorbed enough of the workload that Klarna could reduce their reliance on those external vendors by the equivalent of 700 roles.
Okay, so it's like if I canceled my really expensive weekly lawn care service because I bought one of those automated robot mowers, but the neighborhood rumor mill started telling everyone I evicted my roommate.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yes. The scale of that misunderstanding is just wild to me.
It was a profound misunderstanding. But the thing is, the market reacted to the rumor as if it were absolute fact.
Right, because perception is reality on Wall Street.
Exactly. When those headlines dropped, shares of massive BPO companies like Teleperformance, which is one of the largest call center outsourcers on the planet, their stock just crashed to a 7-year low.
Wow. Just off a headline.
Yeah, institutional investors saw Klarna's announcement and assumed the entire outsourced customer service industry was about to be obliterated overnight by algorithms.
Okay, but here's a question. If the goal was drastically cutting vendor costs to survive a massive financial crisis, and you are a multi-billion-dollar tech company, why outsource the AI?
What do you mean?
Like, why did Klarna rely entirely on OpenAI instead of just building their own proprietary model that they could own forever?
Ah, right. That gets into the brutal economics of artificial intelligence. Training a frontier large language model from scratch requires tens of thousands of specialized microchips operating constantly for months.
Which is incredibly expensive.
We are talking hundreds of millions of dollars in capital expenditure just for the hardware alone. Plus, hiring a small army of highly specialized researchers. Klarna just didn't have the time or the capital for that.
Especially not after losing 85% of their valuation.
Exactly. So by partnering directly with OpenAI, they bypassed the foundational research phase and instantly deployed state-of-the-art technology via an API. They were essentially renting processing power.
Okay, so I hear terms like API integration and AI deployment thrown around a lot. But if I'm being perfectly honest, I usually just picture a single giant digital brain sitting in a server room somewhere answering everyone's questions.
Right, yeah, the sci-fi version.
Yeah. How did they actually build this system so it could handle millions of nuanced financial queries?
Well, that single brain concept is the fundamental illusion of consumer AI. Under the hood, enterprise AI is highly modular.
Okay.
So Klarna used OpenAI's models for the core language processing, the ability to read and generate text, but they wrapped it in an architectural framework called LangGraph.
LangGraph. Okay, what does that actually do?
Think of LangGraph, not as the brain, but as the corporate org chart for the AI.
The org chart.
Yeah. Because if you let a single language model try to solve a really complex database problem, it will often just hallucinate and freeze up. LangGraph allows engineers to build complex multi-agent workflows.
Meaning multiple different AIs talking to each other.
Exactly. One specialized AI agent's only job is to read the customer's mood. Another agent's only job is to securely query the database for a tracking number. A third agent drafts the response.
Oh, that makes so much more sense.
Right, and LangGraph routes the logic between all these distinct agents, and then they monitored all these micro-interactions in real time using a companion diagnostic tool called Langsmith, tracking exactly where the digital handoffs were failing.
When you break it down into specialized agents like that, it makes a lot more sense how they achieve the sheer volume we see in the sources. I mean, in February 2024 alone, this system handled 2.3 million conversations.
Which accounted for a staggering 67% of all their customer service volume globally.
That's wild.
And the multi-agent architecture also allowed them to operate seamlessly across more than 35 different languages instantly.
Oh, so they bypassed hiring all those human translators?
Completely bypassed the massive logistical headache of hiring and scheduling human translators across all those different global time zones.
But, the metric that jumps off the page to me isn't the volume, it's actually the speed. Before this deployment, their average time to resolve a customer ticket was 11 minutes. The AI dropped that to under 2 minutes.
Yeah, massive gain.
Going from an 11-minute wait to a 2-minute resolution feels like magic for a frustrated customer. But the sources show this aggressive AI integration didn't just stop at customer support, right?
Not at all. The support metrics were just the proof of concept. Once leadership saw those efficiency gains, they basically mandated generative AI adoption across the entire corporate structure.
Across the whole company.
Yeah, internal surveys showed 96% of their staff began utilizing AI tools for daily operations. And the impact on their marketing division was particularly severe.
Severe how? Like replacing people.
Well, by utilizing AI image generators like Midjourney and DALL-E, they compressed the time required to produce brand imagery from a 6-week cycle down to just 7 days.
From 6 weeks to a week.
Yeah. And they also developed an internal tool dubbed the Copy Assistant, which ultimately generated 80% of all their marketing text. The marketing department alone stripped out $10 million in annual operating costs.
So they are automating literally every creative, logistical, and operational bottleneck they can find. And when you look at the financial trajectory from 2022 to early 2025, their revenue shoots up 108%, while their operating expenses remain essentially flat.
Which is exactly what you want.
Right, which creates an incredibly lucrative dynamic for a tech company.
It creates leverage. You know, the most critical metric to observe here is average revenue per employee. In 2022, Klarna was generating roughly $126,000 per head.
Okay.
By 2025, through this relentless automation, that figure surged to $203,000 per employee.
Wow.
They were doing vastly more work with a static internal headcount.
And all of this perfectly paves the runway for what they really wanted all along, the IPO. In September 2025, they list on the New York Stock Exchange. The stock pops 30% on the first day, and suddenly the company is valued between $17 and $19 billion.
Huge comeback.
The Wall Street narrative was that Klarna had built the perfect AI-driven business model. But, looking at our sources, analysts were throwing up red flags.
They definitely were.
Yeah, Kate Leggett at Forrester openly questioned if this was actually a sustainable operational strategy. I struggle to see her angle, though. Like, if a company is saving tens of millions of dollars and handling 2 million chats a month, why were the experts so skeptical?
Because financial engineering and operational reality are often two very, very different things.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Well, analysts like Leggett recognize that aggressive short-term automation often masks massive long-term technical debt. The raw numbers looked brilliant for an IPO roadshow, but beneath the surface, the initial architecture of this AI assistant was quietly generating a catastrophic customer service crisis.
A crisis. What exactly was breaking down? Because a 2-minute resolution time sounds pretty flawless to me.
The metric was flawed because the AI suffered from acute contextual blindness.
Contextual blindness.
Yeah, it helps to understand that a large language model doesn't actually know anything in a cognitive sense. It doesn't possess a database of facts or logical reasoning. It is a highly sophisticated statistical engine predicting the next most likely word based on training data.
So it's essentially extremely advanced autocorrect.
Precisely. That is exactly what it is. It is excellent at recognizing keywords, but entirely incapable of understanding intent.
Do you have an example of what that looks like in practice?
Sure. So a customer might submit a highly detailed, nuanced paragraph explaining that a merchant promised a refund 3 weeks ago. But the merchant's website is now completely offline, and the customer needs Klarna to intervene.
A very specific problem.
Right. The AI would simply statistically latch onto the word refund, ignore all that complex context, and just spit out a generic pre-written policy explaining how standard refunds work.
Oh, that is infuriating. It's like the 1990s press 1 for billing, press 2 for support, automated phone tree, but just dressed up with conversational language.
Exactly. And because it was using conversational language, it felt deceptively patronizing. The AI lacked any capacity to read emotional temperature.
Oh, no.
Yeah, if an angry user was locked out of their account right before a crucial transaction, the system would often respond with this chipper, overly enthusiastic tone.
Because nothing escalates a situation faster than a relentlessly cheerful robot telling an angry person their problem is being handled.
Right. But the real breaking point occurred in their fraud dispute resolution. Financial fraud is not a binary repetitive task. It requires logical deduction, investigative nuance, and an understanding of human behavior, none of which a next token prediction engine possesses.
Right, there's no intuition there.
None. So the AI systematically failed to resolve these sensitive cases.
And what happens when it fails? Does it just, apologize and route you to a human?
It did eventually route to a human, but the internal architecture failed to pass along the session context. The human agent would receive a completely blank ticket.
You've got to be kidding me.
Yep.
So a customer who just spent 10 minutes arguing with the cheerful robot about a fraudulent charge finally gets a human, and they have to start completely from scratch.
From the very first sentence, they'd have to explain it all over again. That specific failure loop fundamentally fractures brand trust. It is the exact opposite of operational efficiency.
And the friction wasn't just happening externally with the customers either. The sources show the internal labor dynamics were getting incredibly heated right as this AI was ramping up.
Oh, absolutely.
In late 2023, two major Swedish unions, Unionen and the Engineers of Sweden, actually went on strike. I need you to clarify this for me, though. If the AI was primarily absorbing the jobs of outsourced workers in other countries,
Right.
why were local Swedish engineers threatening to strike?
That dispute highlights a fascinating philosophical collision between Silicon Valley-style disruption and European labor traditions.
Okay, a culture clash.
Big time. The core of the strike wasn't explicitly about the AI taking Swedish engineering jobs. It was about standard operating procedures. In Sweden, the labor market is heavily governed by collective agreements between employers and unions.
Right.
These agreements dictate strict protocols for how structural changes, layoffs, and operational shifts must be negotiated before they even happen.
So the unions were essentially demanding a seat at the table to govern how this technology and restructuring would be implemented.
Exactly that. They wanted Klarna to sign a formal collective agreement. But Klarna's executive stance was that they are an agile global technology firm. They argued that adhering to a localized, highly rigid Swedish union model would destroy their ability to pivot quickly, which, in the age of generative AI, they viewed as death sentence.
Yeah, it's the classic move fast and break things mentality, colliding directly with a culture that values structural stability.
And while Klarna eventually managed to navigate the union dispute to avoid a catastrophic shutdown, the combination of furious customers, failing fraud protocols, and internal labor friction just created an untenable reality.
Which brings us to the great reversal. Okay, let's unpack this. We have an AI fumbling nuanced disputes, generating massive customer frustration, and a company trying to protect a fragile, multi-billion-dollar public reputation right post-IPO. What did the executive team actually do?
Well, they executed a maneuver almost entirely unheard of in the modern tech sector.
Which was?
They publicly admitted they were wrong.
Wait, the CEO actually went on the record and admitted the AI deployment failed?
He admitted it was a profound strategic miscalculation.
Wow.
Yeah, in May of 2025, roughly 15 months after that triumphant 700 jobs press release, CEO Sebastian Siemiatkowski sat down for a Bloomberg interview. He stated very explicitly that the company went too far with automation.
He actually used those words, went too far.
He did. He recognized that isolating customers from human interaction was severely damaging the brand and concluded that investing in a robust human support layer was, in fact, the only sustainable path forward.
I am genuinely shocked a tech CEO in the middle of the current AI hype cycle would admit that human workers are the actual future of their customer retention. How did they fix the infrastructure?
They had to rapidly reverse course. Klarna initiated a massive global rehiring campaign.
So they went back to hiring people?
Yes. They actively recruited remote human agents, specifically targeting university students and highly engaged users of their own app to rebuild that empathetic layer of support.
That's a huge pivot.
It gets crazier. The internal panic was so significant that they even began reassigning technical staff like engineers and marketing personnel into temporary customer success roles just to clear the backlog of frustrated users.
But hold on, let's look at the math here. They initially claimed this AI was going to strip out something like $40 to $60 million in operational costs. If they're suddenly panic hiring humans to fix the AI's mistakes, what happened to the balance sheet?
That is the ultimate financial irony of this whole case. Yahoo Finance analyzed their subsequent earnings, and in the third quarter of 2025, Klarna's overall customer service costs didn't drop. They actually increased year over year.
Wait, really?
Yeah, climbing from $42 million to $50 million.
I need to make sure I understand this. A company famous globally for replacing human labor with artificial intelligence ended up spending millions of dollars more than their original baseline just to hire humans to clean up the algorithmic mess.
Yes.
How is that even possible?
Because a poor customer service interaction is a false economy. An AI might resolve a ticket in 2 minutes by giving a generic answer and closing the chat. On a spreadsheet, that looks like a massive efficiency gain.
Sure, it looks great on paper.
But in reality, that furious customer simply opens a new ticket the next day, escalates it to a higher-tier human manager, or just abandons the platform entirely. The sheer volume of repeat contacts and complex escalations drove their operational costs higher than if they had just let a human handle it properly the first time.
That is a brutal lesson in false metrics. So heading into 2026, where does the architecture actually stand? Did they just unplug the LangGraph system and go entirely back to the BPO call centers?
No, they didn't abandon the technology, they just finally understood its specific boundaries. By 2026, the AI assistant is actually processing an even higher sheer volume of inquiries, equivalent to over 800 full-time roles now.
Oh, wow, so it grew.
It did. However, its job description has been radically restricted. It is now strictly confined to formal, highly repetitive, emotionless tasks.
Like processing a standardized return or updating a shipping address.
Precisely. It executes binary logistics flawlessly. But the underlying routing architecture has been rewritten. The moment the AI detects emotional escalation, or the moment a query involves complex financial fraud, it instantly and quietly hands the session along with the full contextual history over to a human agent.
Oh, so they fixed the blank ticket problem.
Yes, the human actually gets the context now.
Okay, so they reached a hybrid equilibrium. Let the machine do the heavy lifting of the mundane, and let the humans handle the nuance.
Exactly.
But reading the final sources, it seems the CEO is still deeply conflicted about where this all inevitably leads. I'm looking at notes from an appearance he made on the 20 VC podcast in early 2026.
Yeah, that was an interesting interview.
He projects that Klarna's total internal headcount will shrink from roughly 3,000 down to under 2,000 by the year 2030. But he says they aren't going to do mass layoffs. They're just implementing a permanent hiring freeze and letting natural attrition take its course.
And it is worth noting the specific word he used to describe that trajectory on the podcast. He called the process gloomy.
Gloomy. That is a remarkably candid word for a tech founder. It really acknowledges that while finding this hybrid efficiency is critical for survival, the golden era of hypergrowth software companies employing massive, sprawling workforces is effectively over. The floor has been permanently raised by automation.
It really forces us to redefine what makes a worker valuable. The core takeaway from examining Klarna's entire journey, from the 2022 crash to the AI hype to the inevitable human rehiring, is that artificial intelligence is not a blanket replacement for human capability.
Right.
It is a spectacularly powerful tool for formal, rule-based execution. But the second a situation requires deep context, empathy, or nuanced judgment, the algorithmic illusion shatters.
And for you listening right now, there's an incredibly practical lesson embedded here. AI is absolutely going to handle the busy work of your industry. It will draft the emails, it will pull the analytics, and it will track the supply chain.
That's already doing it.
Yeah. But because the mundane is automated, your uniquely human skills, your capacity to read the emotional temperature of a room, to navigate complex interpersonal conflicts, and to apply actual grounded empathy, those are becoming the premium assets in the market. Klarna spent tens of millions of dollars only to prove that you literally cannot automate giving a damn.
That is the reality of the modern market.
Yeah.
And, it leads to one final, deeply provocative thought that extends far beyond customer service.
What's that?
When organizations aggressively optimize their workforce, replacing seasoned employees with efficient algorithms, they risk quietly destroying something called institutional knowledge.
Ah, right. The unwritten rules of the company.
The unwritten rules, the gut instinct an employee develops after seeing 1,000 transactions, the deeply ingrained problem-solving reflexes that are never codified in any official manual.
Yeah, the human intuition part.
Exactly. If you hand all of those daily repetitions over to a statistical engine, and 5 years from now, that complex AI architecture fundamentally breaks, and all the humans who possess the foundational knowledge of how the underlying business actually operates are just gone, who is left to fix it?
Who is left to fix it? It's the ultimate corporate magic trick. You make the massive workforce disappear to appease the market, but you might just accidentally vanish the foundation of your own company along with it. And that is where the real danger lies.